Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Oregon Transportation Meeting for Thursday, May 17th. Thank you for joining us. And first we have the Director's Report. Director Garrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the opportunity. I want to begin with conversation about the DMV Service Transformation Program. Now, you'll know that Tom McClellan and Mr. Ben Kahn have been in front of this commission many times to speak about the evolution of the STP, as we call it. They have shared how this initiative replaces our outdated, a little background music doesn't hurt, replaces our outdated computer system, updates our business process, well, maybe it does hurt, as well as make DMV more efficient, provide more online services to our fellow Oregonians, and more and convenient and accurate transactions. Simply put, the STP is the cornerstone of building the DMV of the future here in the state of Oregon. So, we're hosting an online open house during the month of May to share information with our fellow Oregonians about the Service Transformation Program. We're taking this opportunity to gather input from our customers and stakeholders about what they would like to see in the DMV of the future. But I'm going to defer to a subject matter expert. Oh, there she is. Good. Tom McClellan. And I want to turn to a video and let Tom explain the opportunity that's coming before us here. So with that.
Hi, I'm Tom McClellan, Administrator of the Oregon DMV. We are entering a time of both exciting and challenging transformation. Dramatic changes are happening in the way people order, pay for, and receive services and products from both the public and private sectors. Today, people expect less waiting in lines and more online and self-service options and tools. Our Service Transformation Program is underway to replace outdated technology and computer systems and prepare DMV to innovate the way we do business. This could mean providing more online services, real-time updates, and new technologies for more convenient and accurate transactions. Ultimately, we want to provide the best service that we can, enabling you to do business with the Oregon DMV as easy as possible. As part of this process, we want to share what potential changes are coming and how we can best serve you, our customers. I encourage you to learn about the program and give us feedback on what changes you want to see in the DMV of the future. Visit www.oregondmv.com and sign up for our mailing list so you can stay informed about our transformation and be the first to learn what changes are coming and when. Thank you for helping us create better ways to do business with the Oregon DMV.
So, Madam Chair, certainly appreciate Mr. McClellan and that message to our fellow Oregonians. I would encourage, as Tom did, the Commission to engage and all the good folks in the audience to click on that OregonDMV.com and share your thoughts specific to the open house over this coming month. Madam Chair, I'd like to now ask three individuals to come forward here and sit down. I'd like Gary Farnsworth, Bob Bryant, and Paul Mather just to come forward and sit in the seats here. So, Madam Chair, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that change is the one constant in life. And I think we at ODOT are certainly experiencing this reality. I'm going to speak to three gentlemen, the three gentlemen that I asked to come forward here. One is moving into a new position, and two are retiring from the agency. Simply put, all have expanded the view of the possible for the Oregon Department of Transportation. They have inspired our agency onto achievements on so many different levels. All three embody the notion of character that is contained in the Teddy Roosevelt 1910 Man in the Arena speech. Hopefully folks are aware of that. I'm going to paraphrase it. It's quite eloquent. It's actually my favorite quotation. But Mr. Roosevelt in this speech says many things, but he says, "It is not the critic who counts," and he goes on to say, "the credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood." These gentlemen have been in the arena. These gentlemen are not timid souls and have certainly fought the good fight. So, first, I am pleased to announce to the Commission that we have a new Region 4 manager, and that's Gary Farnsworth. And Mr. Farnsworth begins that responsibility and obligation June 1st. Gary came to the Oregon Department of Transportation in the year 2000 from the Washington Department of Transportation, where he worked in construction engineering, traffic safety, operations planning, and project and program development. So he was a man of all seasons up with WashDOT, I guess, right? All of Gary's 18 years with ODOT has been spent in Central Oregon, Region 4, and he has served in many capacities as an area manager, a tech service manager. He was an interim manager, I think while Bob was back in Washington, D.C. for a while. His accomplishments are many, too many to speak to. I will tell you some that jump out at me. He is a person who invests time in his community, and he has served on various and several community-based organizations. He's been active in delivering a wide range of projects and programs in the Central Oregon area, as well as the lower John Day area up toward the Dalles and so forth. Gary has been the tip of the spear in terms of the area commissions in Central Oregon. And he's been instrumental in a number of statewide efforts, including membership and leadership with the Department's Sustainability Initiative, as well as most recently, Gary was a member of the Strategic Business Plan leadership team to help craft the strategic business plan that the Commission adopted recently. So with that, we extend our congratulations to Mr. Farnsworth and know he will do well in his effort as the Region 4 manager. Now, if Gary's moving into it, someone's moving out, and that's Mr. Bob Bryant. Bob will be retiring from ODOT as the Region 4 manager. He's been with the department for 34 years, most of the time spent in Bend. He came on and put on the uniform back in 1984 and has worn it proud since. He has served on several statewide management initiatives. He provided leadership on some issues that one could call the third rail of transportation, and that was access management. In 2011 and beyond, he helped craft what was a white-hot issue into an issue we rarely hear about right now. It was Bob's leadership, working with industry to find a pathway, to move in a direction that makes things better. It was Mr. Bryant's foundational work on that has positioned us well and has kept that dog asleep in the corner, to be very honest with you. He also has been the tip of the spear for the Oregon Department of Transportation with the federal program known as Forest Land Access Program. He's recognized for many efforts. His fingerprints span from the Dalles to Maupin to Sisters to Madras to Redmond to Bend to Prineville to Klamath Falls to Lakeview. You cannot drive those areas without seeing a piece of infrastructure that Mr. Bryant hasn't touched. So Bob, I want you to know as you depart the ranks and begin to write new chapters in your life, know that you go with the sincere thanks of this agency and of this director as well. You have done us proud, Bob. Congratulations. And then finally, Mr. Mather. As we know, Paul Mather currently heads the Highway Division of the Oregon Department of Transportation. He oversees the 5 regions, technical service disciplines, maintenance and operation, and the strategic service branch within that portfolio. Prior to starting his tour duty as the Highway Division Administrator, Paul was the Region 3 manager down in Southern Oregon. I first contacted Paul, I think it was 23 years ago. I was in a much different position, and we talked about a jurisdictional transfer in Grants Pass that, let me tell you, was not going very well. And it had reached the United States Senate, and that was my role, and I had a conversation with Paul. But I can tell you I remember the professionalism and the way he engaged, and I knew that project, while it was going through difficult times, would weather those choppy waters, and it certainly did, to a point that I think the community embraced and had parties every week as they were moving forward toward completion on that. Paul joined the department in 1984 as a traffic engineer here in Portland. And over the years, he's worked in construction and maintenance, project development in 3 regions, 1, 2, and 3, as well as being there at headquarters. He has served as district manager, so he was a boots on the ground, roll up your sleeves kind of guy in Coos Bay before he became the Region 3 district manager in 1993. Paul delivers significant efforts for this agency. In recent years, he's led this department's response to the state's deteriorating bridge by coordinating the Bridge Option Report, which became the foundation to the 2003 Oregon Transportation Investment Act, at the time a $1.3 billion investment in the state's bridges here. That was the high water mark in terms of investing at the time. He was also at the tip of the spear in delivering the 2009 Jobs and Transportation Act, those 37 projects that span the state here. Again, a high water mark in terms of investment. And simply put, he was instrumental in refining and informing the historic investment that came with House Bill 2017. Now, I just ain't got the words to tell this man how much I appreciate him. But I do know this. Paul, your personal leadership, your strategic leadership has been invaluable to this agency and to the state of Oregon. And I thank you for it, and I wish you well. With that, Madam Chair, I stand down.
Well, let us all give a round of applause for the time shared as well as the new leadership that's coming online. I want to first just say to Bob Bryant, I have had the honor of working with you for a number of years in Region 4, and it's about bringing community together often and managing expectations, and that does not always reconcile in the best ways. But I've watched you in a really masterful way to be able to develop relationships and bring community partners together that maybe didn't really want to be partnering. And I think that you've really helped to establish a great level of expectation and leadership in the area, of which I know that Gary is going to be carrying that as well. And if I look at both to Paul and to Bob, the amount of time that you have spent in an agency that has been transitioning as you've also been serving, we are not the same agency as 20, 30 years ago. It has developed into a multimodal, and so those expectations and the needs and the community and those partners and those relationships matter greatly. And I know that for both of you, it's been an extreme honor to watch you work and orchestrate that. And to say that I am proud to have been on this team with you would be an understatement, but I'm grateful for what you've done, and you've left a foundation that will be here for generations to come, and I hope that you feel proud about the work that you have been a part of, because I know that we are looked at from other states as to how did you get that done, and it wasn't by chance, it was by intentional development and partnerships. So thank you very much for all that you've done, and congratulations to Gary. So please help me say thanks. No parting jokes about the director, no stories you want to tell. We'll say that. Or the commission. We can. All right. All right. Well, thank you very much. And I did want to mention that Commissioner O'Halloran is on the line. He's in traffic, so he will be joining us shortly, but he is joining us via the phone as well. So next we have public comment, and I want to let folks know that I do recognize that we have the value pricing discussion that is next on the agenda, but that is not teed up for a public hearing today. So if you are not a member of the PAC but want to provide input on value pricing, I'm going to ask that we do that now, and then we will have the value pricing update and the informational items. So I would like to go ahead and first call Representative Kraft, who I had the pleasure of meeting just a moment ago. There you are. Please join us. And the standard protocol is please state your name for the record, and the floor is yours. There is a button that you'll need to push so we can hear you. Wonderful to see you. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Chair Boehne. And for the record, my name is Representative Vicki Kraft. I represent the citizens in the 17th Legislative District in Southwest Washington. And I want to say thank you certainly for the opportunity to come and for all of us to be able to share with you today. I know this is not an easy effort. As a legislator, I do want to say as politely but as firmly as possible, The goal of this process should not be to try to modify people's behaviors. It should rather be to serve them. And I had to smile when we started off with the DMV director, Mr. McClellan, his statement about service transformation process. How can we best serve you? That has to be our starting point. It's about what our citizens are demanding from us today. You know, they're driving cars. They're not on transit. And they go to work typically, ideally, between 8 and 6. But now, because of existing congestion, they're going much earlier and much later. Their behavior is already modified. Value pricing is trying to force something unnatural that they are not demanding. It's not their need. That's not what they're asking for. So we have to be extremely careful and vigilant about making sure that we are hearing them, realizing the reality that they are driving cars, they like their cars. So what that means is our main objective has to be to add additional roadway throughput capacity. That's our goal. It's not what somebody puts in a bill, tries to lay down an agenda. I think, you know, we all see some of those realities. But trying to force that change behavior really is not acceptable. And I also want to state the obvious. We in Washington, our commuters, pay income tax to Oregon already. That is our user tax. And I actually used to be one of those folks. I have heard that it's not possible for legislators to use that income for these transportation purposes. I would ask and suggest that my colleagues in Salem change that. We're already paying user tax through that income tax. I want to say softly, but the reality is, you know, the citizens are not money trees. All of our citizens, whether it's Southwest Washington or Oregon, and there is a limit we can all hit and pay. I know we're aware of this, but I'm just stating the obvious. We have to be mindful. Our people are coming over daily. You know, we have about 75,000 commuting across that river. So again, there are household incomes that have limits. We need to be real about that, and just tacking extra, call it a toll, maybe it's a tax, whatever you want to call it, right? It's additional money out of people's pockets. That's real. So we have to be mindful and not go there as much as possible. I want to say in closing, you know, I have talked to some of my Oregon legislative colleagues about the need for more crossings across the river. I know that's not, you know, popular conversation all the time with everyone. But again, when we look at trying to meet the real demand that is there today, and our citizens, both of us, for Southwest Washington and Oregon, they're driving cars. So we need to be real about meeting that demand. And I would certainly welcome continued conversation, and I certainly think I can express from my colleagues in the legislature here in Southwest Washington, we welcome and invite more conversation to look at the real possible solutions to address this congestion issue. It has to be more throughput, and we need to do a better job on our side of the river too, right? But together is how we've got to do this. I'm concerned that there's things, you know, kind of being driven by both sides of the river toward each other right now, candidly. So I think the more, you know, I'd love to just invite everybody for coffee, right? But I think we really need to do a better job of communicating. Let's sit down together. Let's build the relationships. Let's talk about those needs for our citizens collectively in the region, and then come up with real, viable, win-win solutions for our citizens. Thank you very much for the time today.
Well, let me just comment that I believe that we share community, because we have individuals that are working in one community and living in the other, and vice versa. So, you know, as chair of the Transportation Commission, I share that value of making sure that we can meet their needs as well. I think finding a balance is important. Clearly, congestion is causing, not just from a quality of life perspective, but an economic vitality perspective. And so I think that would be on both sides of that fence. And so I welcome the opportunity to meet you today and the chance for us to develop a relationship. And I want us to make sure that we do have good communication. This entire process is one that's based on how do we do what's right, and how do we also answer some questions that we haven't really asked in a while. The Columbia River crossing, when I first came onto the commission a handful of years ago, and I don't think that lump on the back of my head is completely gone, but it's a priority. It's important for both from a resiliency perspective, from the Cascadia, life safety, and also the economic piece to that and building communities. So I think we share some core values and priorities, and I look forward to continued conversation.
Same here. I really do appreciate that, Chair Boehne, and for all of you. I look forward to the continued conversation.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Did someone get their wings? No. Okay. Just checking. All right. We have Ron Swearin, and I understand, Ron, that you may have a couple of items. Oh, good, and some signage. So please state your name for the record, and we do have a timer, and the floor is yours. Go ahead and. There you are. Thank you, Ron.
Ron Swearin, 1543 Southeast Umatilla Street, Portland, Oregon. Good morning, Chair Boehne, Director Garrett, and Commissioners. I wanted to talk about interstate traffic also, and I know that's one of the purposes of the tolling proposal, which I'm generally against, and I'll explain why. I followed the Columbia River crossing issue, and there was a proposal that they referred to as the Western Arterial Highway, and that became reflected in a Washington County study where they referred to it as the Northern Connector. And so I realize that you are generally familiar with Portland area. We seem to have Portland and Bend represented on this committee. So those that know Portland know that the congestion on I-5 has increased since 1990 when Oregon began its economic recovery, and we invited high-tech businesses, and a lot of people were moving into Clark County, so a new paradigm of commuting emerged, but there was really no route other than I-5 and 26 for those Clark County to Washington County commuters. So this idea, let's see, it's upside down. I call it the Western Arterial Highway, and I think it's the most sensible solution because this route, as a new interstate route, well, at least in the Washington County study, it's Oregon only, but there's a future potential for interstate route. It connects existing routes. It would connect Cornelius Pass Road, Columbia Boulevard, and US 30. So the investment is not really great. We have a few hurdles like a tunnel under Skyline, a bridge across the Willamette. But compared to other ideas, this is very simple. It's like, it's so obvious, I can't see how it wouldn't progress further. And I've been getting articles out about it, and it always gets generally good comments. Some people are worried about a new freeway in Portland. This is not a freeway. Most of the route is already there, like Columbia Boulevard, for example, and Cornelius Pass Road. So it's very easy to do. Now, the study identified it as a high-capacity transit corridor, so Columbia Boulevard would suit that purpose well, and it also could have a connection to PDX. So the long-sought Vancouver to PDX connection could be via that route. The HB 2017 has mandated that new transportation proposals be cost-effective. I think this is the most cost-effective solution we could find. We had a review of citizen ideas by an ODOT consultant and a veteran metro traffic modeler, and he said he liked this idea the best too. So it's had some expert review. What we need to do is get a study funded through the Oregon legislature, and I've been imploring and asking some of the agencies like TriMet and ODOT to ask for a study. And I don't know if the OTC can ask for a study through the Oregon legislature. Somehow, you know, we really need to get going on this, I think. And there's a September deadline for 2019 session. So if we can get a study requested by then, that would be really good. No. I think it's very beneficial to mass transit. It's a shorter route than I-5 and 26, and this study has shown some of the benefits. Am I out of time, or?
Yes, actually.
Okay. Sorry.
But if you have materials that you'd like to leave for us, we would love to review those.
I can get some copies and mail them, or now is there a July hearing too in this area?
We do in Portland on the 12th.
On July 12th.
Yes.
All right, I can have
Excellent.
more by then. So.
Wonderful. Thank you for
Okay.
joining us today.
Thank you.
Very much appreciate your comments. And I have Ms. Satterfield. Do you want to join with the pack, or do you want to come now?
I have separate comments.
Okay, great. Please come forward. Thank you for being with us today.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. One in person, one on the phone. My name is Vivian Satterfield. I'm the Deputy Director at Opal Environmental Justice Oregon. We're an organization, nonprofit organization here with a membership base that's comprised mostly of low-income communities and communities of color. Specifically, we have a transit dependent ridership membership group called Bus Riders Unite. And then we also have a youth base as well called the Youth Environmental Justice Alliance, YEJA. YEJA has been working on an issue which directly impacts young people, youth, primarily high school aged youth here in the region, and we've also connected with other youth groups across the state. A really pressing issue that addresses climate, addresses equity, and really a future generation, and that's youth access to transit. So, through HB 2017, we were successful in inserting some language regarding student transportation and youth access to transit as a part of that. Here in Portland, just want to kind of bring it to context where we are here locally. Yesterday, the Portland's City Council authorized to start passing a budget, which actually did not include any funding for youth transit passes. There's been a lot of contention around who ultimately has ownership over youth transportation. I understand that Portland Public Schools does receive a yellow school bus waiver. What we have here are other school districts, however, within the transit service district that would like to come up with some agreement that doesn't require the same funding formula that PPS had reached a number of years ago. It's just not the reality of both the financial feasibility of school districts where they have low tax bases, where increasingly due to gentrification and displacement, we have a lot of youth who are from low-income households, from refugee and immigrant families that do not have any sort of transit benefit. And so we've been working on this issue really with youth voices at the leadership, and I just wanted to lift that up and emphasize the importance not only here in the Portland metro area where we have now a historic infusion of resources to really address access, but also to underscore the importance of those who really are a captive audience. They're unable to drive because of their age, and also we should really be promoting an opportunity to develop the next generation of transit riders. There's also students in other major transit service areas that are also looking at the same opportunity to receive transit passes. So thank you for your consideration.
Well, and so forgive me for not knowing more, but I want to learn. And so do you think that there's a legislative fix that is necessary, or is this a local, because we also, we have different pots of money, and clearly we want to make sure that our youth have access to services, they have access to employment, they have access to education. There just are so many, and if they don't need to purchase a job or purchase a car to seek employment, that really benefits them from a financial aspect as well. So,
That's right.
And all of the other great things that you've noted. So are there particular takeaways that the commission could be involved with? Because I very much am interested in what's happening.
Yeah, so there needn't necessarily be a legislative fix. The language is already written in that once the transit agency receives HB 2017 funds, there's a variety of uses, and student transportation is one of those uses. And here I'd like to emphasize that this is a growing need. It's a campaign that's actually been going on for 2 decades. And so every year, youth are coming to the issue. Youth have been working on the issue who actually will age out before they ever receive a transit benefit. And so we also have a 1% set aside for student transportation that happened in the last legislative session. Forgive me for not knowing the title of the bill, but I can get that to you. These are all sort of patchwork Band-Aid fixes that we're attempting. Ultimately, here locally, it is my organization's belief that it should be the transit district, TriMet, that has full ownership of the program.
That's helpful. I just want to make sure that the legislation that we did have for 2017 met the need, and so it sounds like it's more of an ongoing conversation.
Correct.
Okay, well, wonderful. I very much appreciate you being here today to share this with us. It's critical to the success of the community.
Thank you much.
Yes. Okay, I have John Lay. Hi.
Good morning.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. I'm John Lee from Clark County. Portland has the 12th worst traffic congestion in the nation. I-5 is congested 15.5 hours on an average day. For the past 4 decades, Oregon has refused to add new vehicle capacity in the Portland area. Alondo Simpson describes current efforts as a Band-Aid to a wound. Sadly, the ODOT staff and consultants are recommending using the smallest possible Band-Aid. Washington County Commissioner Roy Rogers says the current choice, option B, is a non-starter. This comes from the man representing Oregon's largest private employers. He says those employers will stop using the Port of Portland and go elsewhere if we don't fix the problem. It doesn't have to be a non-starter. Originally, there were 8 options presented. Sadly, the staff recommended eliminating the one option that was the overwhelming logical choice. Option 4 would build a new lane in each direction on both I-5 and I-205 and only toll the new lanes. It offered the most congestion relief. It offered the least traffic diversion and had minimal impact on equity communities. Yet the 25-member PAC was not allowed to vote on this choice, even though they voiced very strong support for it. The next logical choice was option D, build a new lane in each direction on I-205 from the Abernathy Bridge to Stafford Road. That too was eliminated by staff. If you keep kicking the can down the road, I-5 will be congested 20 hours a day. We're expecting 750,000 new residents in the metro area. We'll be saying Oregon refused to add capacity for 5 decades. You can stop this and actually do more than offer a Band-Aid. Bill Clinton won the presidency in 1992 by reminding voters, it's the economy, stupid. When it comes to traffic congestion, it's about the lack of capacity. Finally, the staff say a legitimate fix is just too expensive. It's not going to get any cheaper if you kick the can down the road again. Stop wasting valuable transportation dollars as well. Half of the $450 million allocated for the Rose Quarter is going to community redevelopment, allocating money to create real estate by building 2 lids over the top of I-5. This has nothing to do with vehicle safety or improving traffic congestion. Please step up to the plate, add some legitimate vehicle capacity. There are 50,000 vehicles presently diverting to side roads due to the lack of capacity. It was mentioned that another 80,000 could be diverting in the present discussions. The 5 OTC members can begin fixing the problem if you add legitimate capacity and stop wasting our tax dollars. Please do the right thing. We don't want Portland to become Seattle. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you would like to enter your comments into the record, that would be beneficial as well. But if not, we captured them. But as I mentioned to Representative Kraft, thank you so much for making time to be here today, and we look forward to the ongoing discussions. I think you raised some great points and appreciate the fact that you made time to be here today.
Thank you, Tammy.
Yes, thank you. Okay, next I have Mayor Hill, and I also have Dave Hageberg. I'd like to call you both up. And then on deck is John Charles. Nice to see you both.
Good morning, Commissioners. I am Scott Hill, Mayor of McMinnville, and I have with me Dave Hogelberg, who is the Yamhill County Bypass Chairman. And we're here just to, number one, give thanks to ODOT for a job well done on Phase 1 of the Newburgh-Dundee bypass. It has exceeded our expectations. We've given the city back to Newburgh and Dundee, where commercial traffic is now being diverted to 219. But I'm here to talk a little bit about the other story, and that's for the communities that are south and west of Newburgh and Dundee. And on a daily basis, I'm hearing accolades from our business communities, our citizens, of what this 219 has done for our community. Those coming in to work at McMinnville find from the north it's a much easier travel. Those leaving McMinnville going north to work are feeling that same relief. Businesses are telling me that getting product to market and goods coming in, much easier to do that now. On the weekends, tourists come to Yamhill County, and they're taking advantage of that also, as is the traffic going to the coast. And so I just want to thank ODOT for a job well done. And a part of, we brought a statement of support from the mayors of Dundee, McMinnville, Newburgh, Yamhill County, the Confederated Tribes, and the Parkway, of the support of Phase 2. That's the question I get asked all the time, is we've done well on Phase 1, where are we going to go now? And so that was the intent of coming today, is to thank and to share our desire and support to move forward. And with that, I'll turn the rest of the time over to Dave.
Now for the ask.
That's right. My name's Dave Hogelberg. I chair the Yamhill County Parkway Committee. Chair Bainey, members of the Commission, Director Garrett. Really is pretty simple, and one of the things that we know about this project is it's been incredibly successful. I have not yet heard a criticism of the work that you as a department have done on that highway, in both planning and what it looks like, how it operates, and how it fits into the communities. So thank you. The Parkway Committee and our representatives have already had an opportunity to meet with Director Garrett's staff to talk about the build grant opportunities that are coming up in July. We think this project is an ideally situated one for that ask. In terms of incredible support, you don't have a lot of controversy. In fact, you have no controversy about the project. It is a project that is being not only successful, but has a lot more future opportunities for success if we continue to develop it. It's in a rural area, which is a high priority in this next opportunity. It's on a high priority corridor under Congress. It's a great freight route. So we think the opportunity is there, and we look forward to working with the director and his staff on what would be an appropriate build grant ask. And then the last thing, we continue to pledge to you as a department the support of our group to support whatever your ask would be, and we want to be one of those three, both from our local group, from our consultants, and from the commitment on our behalf to send people to Washington, D.C. along with our strategic partner in Washington, D.C. We will be there with you, hand in hand, as a part of that effort and the opportunity and the ask to support that kind of a request. So happy to answer questions, but you've absolutely got an entire region that is extraordinarily pleased with this project. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Well, and the success is really yours. It very difficult to bring together a community in the way that you have, all moving forward in the same direction with the same common shared value and goal over an extraordinarily long period of time. And so kudos to you for the great work that you've done on the ground. And we've been briefed on the request, and so we very much look forward to the ongoing conversations, and I think there'll be more to come. So wonderful to see you as always, and thank you for your continued partnership and leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John Charles, and then on deck I have Orlando Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is John Charles, president of Cascade Policy Institute, which is a nonprofit policy research center based in Portland. And we're interested primarily in market-oriented solutions to public policy challenges. I'm not a member of the Value Pricing PAC, but I have been a promoter of congestion pricing for about 30 years. I helped Metro secure a grant 25 years ago to study the same issue, and I was on their advisory committee for what became the Traffic Relief Options Study in the late 90s. I also served on ODOT's Road User Fee Task Force for 10 years. So I've thought a lot about road user fees, and I've given dozens and dozens of speeches to mostly hostile audiences in which I was promoting market-based pricing, and the default position of the audience is they don't like it. So I'd like to just make 2 points to you today as you engage with the discussion with the PAC, things that you could help them for their next and final meeting. I've watched most of their meetings online or in person, and so far there's 2 things I think that are missing. That is tolling. Why would you toll? And to me, you have to have travel time benefits to the user. So and most of the express lane projects around the country are saying, well, our goal is to guarantee, in about 95% of the time, minimum speeds for the user of 45 miles per hour or better, because that's really that's how you get the maximum theoretical throughput of a lane. You want to have the lanes perform well, the current lanes, before you even add lanes. So there has to be travel time benefits. In my view, a minimum of 40 and probably a maximum of 50 at the peak period. If you start guaranteeing 70 miles per hour, then you're going to lose capacity because cars are spaced too far apart. So to me, that's the value proposition in value pricing. You can't just pick tolls out of thin air. The toll rates have to be set to give the user what they want: reliability and speed. And second, the money from value pricing has to stay in the system. There's been a lot of talk on the committee about diverting the money for a whole bunch of other projects and purposes that have merit, I suppose, but that's not the purpose of value pricing. I echo the earlier comments of other witnesses. The money has to stay on the roads for maintenance and expansion of those facilities. So obviously, we need a 3rd, 4th, or 5th bridge across the Columbia. We need new lanes. We need probably new highways. The benefit of congestion pricing as an intellectually rigorous concept is that it tells you, the operator, when to expand, where to expand, and most importantly, who is willing to pay for the new capacity. So you should make these highways 100% financed by user fees and guarantee that the money will be reinvested for the capacity needed and wanted by the users. Okay, well, when you have that, the money is reinvested, and you're essentially guaranteeing travel time benefits. That's the value proposition in value pricing. So I suggest before you leave your conversation with the committee today, that you politely suggest to them when they meet the next time, don't even talk about diverting money for other uses, and make sure you bring us a recommendation that has travel time benefits to the users. Otherwise, you're not helping us. I think those 2 points have been lacking in conversations to date, and you could really help by drilling down on those. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for those specific recommendations. I appreciate that, and great to see you.
Thanks.
Okay, Orlando Lopez, and then I have Charles, and possibly nicknamed Skip Ormsby. Great, hi, okay. So you're on deck, just one moment. Good morning. You push the talk button on the right, and there you go. Yes, state your name for the record, nice to see you.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Orlando Lopez, and I'm a community organizer with Opal Environmental Justice, and also the organizer for Bus Riders Unite. I'm also a resident of Southeast Portland. I live off of 92nd and Holgate, very close to the 82nd corridor. East Portland is actually one of the most diverse parts of Portland, and you'll find that many people who now live there have been displaced from other parts of the city. 82nd Avenue is actually one of the major arteries of this of our community, but 82nd Avenue also needs safety improvements. People are constantly being trying to dodge vehicles because there aren't safe crosswalks, especially as they're trying to get to bus stops. There's a lot of areas along 82nd where there are virtually no sidewalks, and lighting is actually, also not as good in a lot of these areas as well. bike paths are virtually non-existent. And a lot of times you see bike riders on 82nd Avenue riding along vehicles. As you move forward with your conversation around congestion pricing, please don't consider putting tolling on I-205, at least not yet, because this will force many vehicles onto neighboring streets, such as 82nd, which would adversely affect transit lines, especially Line 72. I'm not sure if anybody here has actually ridden on public transit in Portland or even on Line 72, but 82nd Avenue is already facing a lot of congestion, and this line is one of the workhorses of our whole transit system. Has one of the highest riderships, one of the most diverse riderships, but any transit rider will tell you that because of the congestion, it already has a lot of issues of unreliability. What we see is a lot of buses being bunched together, and so sometimes people rather take their cars and stop riding transit and adding more congestion onto our streets. So in order for us to consider even putting tolling, we have to prioritize buses on our transit system, and East Portland doesn't have the infrastructure that prioritizes buses currently. So we need to think about adding those as options for folks who will not be able to pay for the tolling, and currently we don't have any of that. The other thing is that there's a lot of conversation about highway expansions, and I-205 is going through a neighborhood that's mostly very diverse, low income, and is already facing a lot of health issues. Adding more capacity to add more vehicles is only going to add to the pollution that our communities are already facing. Expanding highways is a false solution because you're only encouraging more people to drive. What we need is more other options for our people to get to and from the places they need to go. And public transportation is, if done correctly, can be that solution. Thank you for your time.
Well, let me just say thank you for your investment of time into your community. You've raised some great points, and I appreciate your involvement. We would like to see a comprehensive solution-based outcome around 82nd, and so we have been briefed on some of the concerns that you've raised, and we are actively involved in discussions too. So thank you for your commitment and involvement, and I think we'll have more dialogue going into the near future.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet. Okay, and I have Mr. Ormsby, please. And then that's who I have signed up. If anyone else wants to approach the commission, I'll ask for you to let me know that in just one moment. So, hi.
Okay, thank you. My name is Charles Ormsby. I go by the nickname Skip. I'm co-chair of what is referred to as the Birds Hill CPO&A. We're on the northeast quadrant of the Lake Oswego Urban Growth Management area. Our community straddles Highway 43, which is considered an orphan highway by ODOT. You've been trying to sell it to somebody for the last 20 years at least, like the Brooklyn Bridge. I'm here on about multiple issues. I thank you for the community aspect of encouraging community dialogue on this. Dialogue needs to start taking place rapidly on Highway 43. Transit-dependent riders like myself are facing congestion and arduous means of negotiating that roadway. They are not being addressed uniformly between multiple jurisdictions, literally from the start of Highway 43 at the Ross Island Bridge south to Oregon City at OR Highway 99E McLaughlin Boulevard. This is becoming increasingly apparent with the evolution of expensive infrastructure, notably the Clackamas County Courthouse moving from downtown Oregon City to the Red Soils campus, which is the headquarters of Clackamas County, $160 million. Transfer times are abysmal. On-time performance on Highway 43 is abysmal, and it's being exacerbated by the city of Lake Oswego. They have two things. One is a safety issue coming up on July 4th. You need to address immediately. They want to put a fireworks display on River Mile 21 of the Willamette River, which is about 6.7, which is McVeigh Avenue, the Oswego Creek Bridge, south to 7.2, which is, I believe, is Cherry Avenue. You're going to have safety issues with TriMet buses negotiating that area, let alone congestion. Lake Oswego has not proffered any plans for traffic mitigation, traffic abatement, fire safety, anything in the last year. They probably have to let a contract go on this display by June 15th and get a permit. Nothing is being coordinated between ODOT, Lake Oswego, Clackamas County, and it's a nut house of jurisdictions. That needs to be done and addressed immediately. It's a safety issue. Second, at the intersection of Highway 43, aka State Street, and Lake Oswego B Avenue, Lake Oswego has a project which could theoretically mitigate a right-hand turn, and they're doing nothing about it. That needs to be addressed immediately as well. They'll probably be coming to you for permits within the next 2 months. Their current designs do nothing to mitigate issues. You wrote a letter to them December 8th, 2017, basically saying they had to do something. They've allocated no money to do anything. I've testified on this and essentially been put off, put down, and put in my place. I'm not going to tolerate that position by the mayor of Lake Oswego, the city council, the city engineer, the city attorney, anymore. I want action, and I want it yesterday. If not, where do I complain? Otherwise, I'll find people in Washington, D.C. I've had it. I'm just giving you straight. I want to establish community. I want to establish conversations. I want to establish communication. But people who, in my disposition, that I'm a caregiver 24/7. My mother's lived in this area since 1952 August, and we have problems. I don't have a position, a paycheck, perks, and a pension. I can only fantasize about those that do. And I'm getting tired, especially by the city of Lake Oswego, and the lack of communication between ODOT, the Transit Union, TriMet. It needs to be done stat. If you know what that word means, drop everything, do it today. Thank you.
Yes. And did you have a third point?
I've got about 8 others.
If you want to submit in writing,
yeah, I'll do so. And
okay.
To put together a packet on this is incredibly complex.
Okay. Well, what I would like to do is, I know we have Ryan in the room, Mr. Winchhammer. If you could just follow up on a few of the comments that have been noted, that would be great. And we very much appreciate you raising these concerns and bringing them to us.
Do support the relations between ODOT and TriMet drivers to make sure. I'm a transit rider. I'm going to hit line 35 to get back to my mother right now.
Okay.
Thank you. Good
Thank
day.
you very much. Okay, I believe with the sheets that I have, is there anyone else who wanted to approach the commission? Okay, so that concludes public comment. Welcome, Commissioner O'Halloran. Nice to see you. So I feel like we're, okay, value pricing. So let's go on to an update on value pricing. And what I'd like to do is go ahead and Ryan, I'll look to you, but I want to first say thank you to Commissioners O'Halloran and Simpson for being our people with this particular item. And I know we have a number of PAC members that are here. So if you are a PAC member and you would like to come on up, please. And I know Ms. Jarvis, I believe you had some comments. So please do join us, and we will go ahead and have a conversation and let us know. I think it would be valuable with some of the concerns that might have been raised as well to give us feedback on thoughts that have already been presented. So, Ryan, shall I turn it over to you?
Thank you.
Yep.
Chair Boehne, members of the commission, certainly, and I think in terms of response to a number of the concerns you've heard, I think having the PAC up here to have an opportunity to share with you a number of the concerns that have already been raised, and I'm sure there will be many more, and how we're sort of working through all of those. And it's been really valuable having Commissioner Simpson and O'Halloran on the committee to help hear those and make sure that people are feeling heard. This is just another one of those opportunities, and I think you've heard this morning just from a few folks, but there are high passions on this topic. A lot to learn for a lot of us, and it's having been sort of a new topic to this region. Yeah, just a lot of information and a lot to learn. So we're gonna spend most of this presentation sharing with you a lot of how we are educating ourselves and the PAC about value pricing, and some of the recommendations in terms of where we are leading up to, but we still have work to do in terms of determining our recommendations. So I don't think we're going to be prepared to tell you what that looks like exactly today, because we have again a little bit more work to do. And listening to the comments that were shared today, I'm sure those will also be taken into consideration by the PAC. So I appreciate the opportunity to hear those as well.
And it would be important to note that we do have a hearing that's slated for the OTC on July 12th. And so for those that are here and also want to give further comments, we are receiving those throughout the months as we go forward, but obviously we'll be looking forward to that testimony on the 12th as well.
I think between you and I, we're now going through a lot of Mandy's talking points. But yes, no, absolutely. And certainly we want to make sure that folks know, and we have been very, very transparent within our process in terms of our meetings being publicly noticed. We're being available on the internet so that folks can watch those, and as well as our additional engagement. But certainly the opportunity that once a recommendation is produced by the PAC, to have that opportunity to meet with you directly, share some of the folks that you heard today will, I'm sure, want to weigh in and share their opinions and feedback on what that recommendation looks like. So having that opportunity here in Portland for folks to have that conversation with you, I think is really valuable, and I'm sure they will appreciate that. So let me start by just saying good morning, and thank you for having us. And as you heard from citizens and businesses around the state at your town hall meetings, during that investment strategy development process, growing congestion in the Portland metropolitan area is affecting not just livability, but is having strong impacts on our very trade-dependent economy. As you passed on your investment strategy to the legislature, they did take comprehensive approach in HB 2017 to reduce congestion in the Portland metropolitan area by providing significant investments in regional highway bottleneck improvements, transit, biking, walking, and technology, and really trying to improve our multimodal network with the investment dollars that they had, and really taking a strong step in that direction. In addition to that, of course, they provided direction to you to seek approval from Federal Highways by the end of the year to look at I-5 and I-205 specifically in terms of where may be the best opportunities to pursue congestion pricing, and if that application is approved, we're further directed to implement that. Having received that direction from the legislature, you gave us here at ODOT some direction in terms of engagement, producing a policy advisory committee, engaging them in a process of education and additional looks at where these particular areas are. And we have done that, and in particular, having Commissioner Simpson and Commissioner O'Halloran lead that group, and making sure that we are getting the best information we can from some very smart consultants, and taking that information and sharing it with the group and getting a lot of feedback. So you're going to hear from Mandy Putney, who's our major projects manager here in Region 1, was our major projects manager here in Region 1, is now our policy and development manager in Region 1, recently promoted. Congratulations, Mandy. About that effort and the steps that we've taken to inform this process. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Mandy.
Is there a clicker? Great. Thank you for having us. I'm going to do a brief overview, so I know you want to have a conversation with the PAC members that are here today, and what I'll talk through is the feasibility analysis process that we've embarked on, what we've been learning so far, what we've been hearing from the community, spend some time specifically to talk about the Policy Advisory Committee, the PAC process, and the recommendation framework, and what we expect to see in the next few months, and then moving forward after that. So here is a long timeline, a look ahead at the years to come, and really the purpose of this process is to show that we are very early in a process that's going to take a number of years. We are just starting conversations now that we'll be able to build upon as we move forward. And as Ryan said, we move forward with developing a policy advisory committee after hearing the direction from the OTC to do that. As we were working to convene the PAC, we also worked to bring aboard some technical support to provide resources to us as we did this work. So we have a consultant team on board that brings with them international expertise on value pricing. as well as bringing staff from Metro and from Southwest Washington RTC to the table to support our core traffic modeling work group that's been meeting weekly since we started. So they've been putting a great deal of work into this. We are relying on the Metro model as the basis for our work, which is the model that's used for all traffic planning and transportation planning projects in the region. And then specifically, we are looking at the RTP project list, looking at year 2027. So that list assumes that the House Bill 2017 projects will have been built, as well as all of the other transit and active transportation projects that are included in that list. So that's the Rose Corridor 217 and the widening of 205.
Oh, Mandy, real fast before you go on to the next slide, can you just take a quick second and kind of give a quick overview of what you would expect to take place within that 2019 to 2021 period, as you have in there, which is identify the NEPA and traffic and implementation after the report is submitted?
Happy to. So this is a feasibility analysis. We are looking at the likely, to try to figure out what is the most feasible location or locations for pricing on I-5 and I-205. We are doing preliminary analysis and evaluation, and you'll hear more about some performance measures that have been developed by the PAC. This is a precursor to much more detailed work that will happen in the future. More detailed environmental and community analysis, most likely under the National Environmental Policy or NEPA process. We'll do much more detailed traffic and revenue analysis, and then also work to really nail down the implementation and think about, the back office and the systems that need to be in place before you can start pricing. We will submit our work to the Federal Highway Administration at the end of the year, and then we'll work with them to figure out what the specifics are in terms of each of these next steps, as well as the timeline. So we have a kind of a block there of these are the things. We don't yet know exactly when we would start them and what they would entail. Helpful? There'll be ongoing public engagement through all of that work. We've split our feasibility analysis into two main phases, the first being a learning phase and the second to work on the recommendation. Really over the first few months, we spent time with the public and with the PAC understanding how congestion is currently impacting I-5 and I-205 and this region and the state, learning about who is living near the corridors and who might benefit and be concerned or impacted by potential changes, learning about specific bottleneck areas on the corridors, and learning about congestion pricing and what it is and how it works and how it's been implemented elsewhere, and specifically the connection between pricing and transit improvements that have gone hand in hand, typically throughout the country. We've been hearing from the public about their questions and their values and their concerns, and we've been receiving some initial and preliminary technical findings. We've now moved into the recommendation phase, where we're still considering public input. We're delving deeper into policy issues and considerations, discussing mitigation options and how to increase benefits for all, and how to best apply pricing here specifically in this region. And I'll tell you more about these phases as we move forward. We know that tolling and pricing are new concepts for many in Oregon and in this region, and so we have been conducting an extensive engagement and education effort so that we can explain the terminology and the concepts, and then also engage people in conversation so they can share their ideas with us. We've done this through a series of tools that I'll tell you about, and have received an extensive amount of comment and feedback as people start to understand how congestion pricing can improve mobility for the region. We use social media and more traditional media to help spread the word. We've had online open houses and in-person events, and have been doing presentations. We've done discussion groups focused specifically on equity and low-income communities and communities of color, and then 8 in-person open houses at various locations throughout the region, and accompanying each set of those open houses was an online option so that people could attend at any point if they wanted to. Our input has been significant. We've been able to engage over 16,000 participants. Many of them have given us verbal comments, but we've received over 6,000 comments electronically or in writing, and 2,500 people have completed surveys, questionnaires that we've had online. As we've been talking to people, we've heard some reoccurring themes, and this is true regardless of where we are, what county we are in the region. There's agreement that congestion is a problem, and that congestion is currently negatively impacting people's lives and their family lives, and that they think something needs to change. There's a connection between population growth, and that's adding additional pressure in terms of how they experience congestion and how it impacts their family. There are a lot of questions about what congestion pricing is. Does it really work? How would it work? How can you make sure it's effective? Some skepticism that it could actually work here. And then we have a lot of questions and concerns about how specifically would pricing affect people that are low income and already challenged in many ways to move about the region. Many of these concerns have been reflected on our Policy Advisory Committee. It's about 25-member advisory committee. We worked hard to bring a diverse group of viewpoints to the table. As you heard, it's chaired by 2 of the commissioners, and we have Federal Highway Administration also represented on this committee to help us in terms of federal policy and process. The committee is scheduled to meet 6 times. They've met 5 of those 6 times already. And again, a lot of their first meetings was focused on learning, and we're now moving into quite a bit of discussion and deliberation. We spent the first meetings really thinking through, how to move forward. The committee finalized their charter, developed performance measures, and those performance measures are specific to this analysis in terms of thinking about the concepts that were on the table and how to evaluate them based on reliability and time savings and freight impacts and air quality. And so there was quite a range of interests in terms of monitoring. And again, we are at a feasibility analysis level, so there were some limits to what could be accomplished, and what will be, more details will be available later. But there were 8 initial concepts that were developed by the consultant team. They were screened with these performance measures, and then there were 5 concepts that were determined to move forward for round 2 evaluation. That was a slightly more deeper dive into the concepts. And I will go through them relatively quickly. The first one was looking at the current HOV lane in North Portland and converting that HOV lane to a price lane or a high occupancy tolled lane, and then to convert the general purpose lane going southbound in the same direction to a priced lane. The next concept was looking at pricing I-5 on all lanes between Going Street, or Alberta Street, and Multnomah Boulevard in Portland. The next concept was pricing I-5 and I-205, all lanes on both corridors in both directions, from the Columbia River to where the corridors split near Tualatin. And then the next one was pricing I-5's new lane, the 3rd lane that will be added. The last concept was was with a slightly different intent. So those first 4 really were looking at how to manage congestion on the system. Through that process, there was some conversation about being able to fund improvements that are currently planned on I-205, widening between Stafford Road and Abernathy Bridge. And so there was a 5th concept that looked at raising revenue in that area to provide a revenue source potentially for some of those improvements, given that that was already a planned bottleneck relief project that doesn't have full funding. So the committee has now moved into the recommendation phase, where there has been robust discussion and deliberation. In April, we focused those conversations on policy considerations and mitigation approaches, looking at examples from around the country, and then thinking about which one of those, which might apply here and how, as well as other ideas that could come into play. The meeting that we just had Monday this week looked at the findings from those those 5 concepts. The consultant team provided a recommendation of not moving a couple of them forward. The PAC has not come to agreement about recommendation, and we don't expect a consensus recommendation from this committee. So this committee has been structured to continue to provide their input. There might be points of agreement and there might be points of disagreement, and that will all be presented to the OTC in July. I think, though, there was general concurrence with the consultant recommendation that the conversion of the HOV lane to a tolled lane was a concept that there wasn't interest from anyone around the table to move forward with. There were questions and comments on all the other concepts. Yeah.
I'd just like to add something about these last these 2 meetings here that we had on mitigation. That was probably my favorite meeting in that it actually gave folks an opportunity to sit down and talk about what are their concerns around tolling, not just about where, but about what are the concerns around that. How are we going to handle equity issues? What are some opportunities for managing those? What are other people's ideas? What are some best practices from other areas? And we had the opportunity to really sit down and have some breakout groups and opportunities to discuss those that I think brought a lot of good ideas that we were going to be sharing with you as with any of the opportunities that move forward and any of the areas that we're looking at. I think we want to make sure we're taking all of those opportunities for mitigation into consideration. And there's a lot more to talk about and to understand about how those operate and how they might be funded. But those are conversations that are going to be part of a future conversation. This was really our opportunity to identify those and make sure that they were on the table and that people were heard around a number of concerns relating from what about unpriced or unbanked populations to the increase of transit service and a whole range of them. But just that was one of my favorite meetings, in that it really brought the group together around exploring and having the opportunity to share their concerns that hadn't happened to that point. And I think we made a lot of progress at that meeting. And I'm sorry, I passed it back.
That's great. You will likely hear more about that conversation and others as we turn it over to you and the PAC members that are here. So moving forward, this process has been set up to culminate in the final meeting on June 25th. We'll be looking to the PAC to come to as many points of agreement as possible to provide advice to the OTC on next steps and what proposal to move forward to the Federal Highway Administration. Specifically, the PAC has been asked to look at the location or locations and the type of pricing. So is it one lane, one managed lane, or a full corridor, all lanes? And then to think about mitigation strategies and or project development approaches. And typically when you think about mitigation as after a project has already been planned, and mitigation is how you deal with the results and the outcomes that weren't as favorable. So we're using that term kind of upfront with the hope that we can develop strategies that can be incorporated as the project develops. So that will improve the benefits for everybody and reduce the impacts. So it's kind of a hard term to use early since we don't have a project yet, but we're trying to anticipate what the concerns could be and how can we develop the best project possible. So as noted a couple times earlier, there is a special meeting with the Transportation Commission on the 12th. That is where the PAC recommendation will be shared and presented. You'll also hear about the technical findings and an update on public comment. We would then hope to hear back the following month regarding direction on what to move forward to FHWA so that we're able to meet our end of the year deadline. In between then, we will work on compiling the report and writing up our materials and our summary. We do have a report due to the Joint Committee on December 1st that's focused on funding and 205, and then the proposal due to FHWA by the 31st of December. We'll be looking for kind of final review in the November timeframe from OTC, so that we have enough time to get everything ready and to go. We do have the questions. I'll turn it back over to you for your discussion.
Great. Well, let me just kick off by stating, first of all, thank you to the PAC members and the commitment of time. And I know that this is not an easy topic. If it were simple, it would have already been done, right? We would have figured it out. And so it takes people that are really invested in finding solutions to sit around a table and work through those challenges. I have had a chance to watch, except for the Monday meeting. I've enjoyed watching the progression of the discussion, but also the spirited dialogue. I think that's where you really get the meat of a substance, and so I appreciate that that's encouraged. When we started out on this journey, we wanted to make sure that what we're doing meets the needs of those that we are serving. But we also wanted to make sure that we do that and we address congestion. I think we can all agree that that's a problem. But we want to do that in the most equitable way and make sure that we are not also creating diversion onto the system that's not included to where we're causing problems outside of an area that we're trying to solve an issue. So I'll turn it over. I'm not sure who is going to be taking the lead from PEC members. But I would also welcome to commission members if you have questions or comments that you want to get started with. So Ryan, you look ready.
Well, thank you, Chair Bainey. I guess I would just make sure that we are reminding the PAC. We do have some questions that I think were to help stimulate some of the conversation and give you some feedback related to what we've asked of the PAC members. So in addition to what I'm sure folks will want to share with you, their own views and maybe some additional ideas, we've asked them to share with you a little bit about these three questions as they move forward with that. And I think it's really up to you as to how we'd like to take comment from the members. Maybe just start with.
Sure. Let me just make sure from commission members, do you have initial comments or questions? All right. So should we start with Mr. Dirksen? Go right ahead.
Thank you, Chair Bainey and members of the commission. Looking at the first question, how do we know if we've been successful? We need to ask ourselves, what's our goal? Our goal here is to reduce congestion in the region and particularly on those facilities. So by reducing congestion would imply that people have other options on how they get around rather than being dependent on those facilities particularly. Well, that means when we implement, at the time we implement tolling, people must have those other options. Those other options must already exist when tolling is implemented. And that's going to mean improvements to transit access, and also other options on surface streets and other ways to get around. So our goal would be reduce travel times, reduce congestion, but in giving people other options as well. And that also will address the concerns about equity and mitigation at the same time. So I would say that's when we know we've been successful, when we provide people with those other options that they can choose to use. With the second question, we think that the pilot project on I-5 through the city core is a good idea, and perhaps be considered in conjunction with another segment on I-205 as well, which would help mitigate any kind of diversion.
We also think that when I say we, I mean the Metro Council, that the consideration of tolling all lanes on both 205 and I-5 should go forward for further consideration as well.
Councilor Dirksen, can you please, as you're explaining what your recommendation or what you and Metro Council would prefer to see identified as which concepts would be most feasible, just so my fellow commissioners can get a better understanding of which one, because some of the concepts both have I-5 tied to it, and I just don't want to have any confusion.
Well, I think it's B, concept B is the I-5 in the core from Going Street to Multnomah Boulevard. And since that's on I-5, to avoid diversion, if there was also a segment of I-205 that was being tolled at the same time, that would balance that out. But also we see the analysis shown that the greatest benefit and the diluting the cost to users in general by tolling all lanes of both facilities from end to end. Also, because you're tolling more people over a broader range, it means that each person's toll would be less. And so we see that as beneficial. And the analysis by the consultant has shown that actually provides the best benefit for congestion reduction as well. So I think that should go forward for further consideration. Speaking for myself, as you may know, I am the chair of the Governor's Road User Fee Task Force. And as that process goes forward, and as we look at the longer range of the consideration for tolling, I think that there's an opportunity there where those two concepts could be integrated together, and actually a road user fee, a universal road user fee statewide, could actually create the vehicle by which congestion pricing could be, if it's a variable fee, that's a way you could actually implement congestion pricing as well. So I think as we look forward in the long term, that should be considered. Also, I think I would like to share that discussion with the general group has shown that while our goal this year is to make a recommendation within these parameters so that the OTC can make a recommendation to the legislature, et cetera, we all see the need for a more comprehensive consideration and analysis of the entire metro area where we think tolling would be most appropriate. This is something, even after we've made this process, completed this process this year, that analysis should continue to go forward and other things be able to be considered prior to any tolling being implemented, which we all anticipate would be probably a 10-year time period before that could take place.
Thank you for the opportunity to offer some comments, and I want to appreciate Commissioner O'Halloran and Commissioner Simpson for their leadership in this process. I participated in all but one of the meetings. I regret that I was traveling during PAC meeting number 4, but did submit my comments around the especially equity and mitigation strategies in writing, so that is a part of the record as well. As you heard from my colleague Orlando Simpson earlier, Orlando Lopez, I'm sorry. I've worked with him for a very long time. Earlier, I want to underscore the sort of concerns that we have locally on 82nd Avenue. Our office happens to be located at the intersection of 82nd and Powell, so we see a lot of interesting behavior from all variety of road users trying to navigate a really difficult street. For our constituency, and again underscoring some of Councilor Dirksen's comments around the need for this to be looked at holistically with transportation options and public transit. Worked really hard to ensure that we could have a low-income fare here in order to ensure that our constituency, which is growing, unfortunately, of low-income transit-dependent riders who are increasingly, because of housing affordability, constraints and pressures in the metro area, are being displaced to areas of the region without any sort of transportation options, and a large part of our constituency is also undocumented, and here in the state of Oregon, we've chosen not to allow those folks access a legal path towards operating motor vehicles. So this is really a captive population with not a lot of choices at all. So some of our comments really have to do with if we're going to implement some sort of value pricing, how does that impact people who are operating motor vehicles? How will we ensure that they're not being financially burdened by that, and how can we make sure that they can still access the places they need to go, especially where job centers are, which are still primarily in the city core and along areas like the Columbia Corridor. Living wage jobs are available, and those transit connections are still not, they're in the plans, but they're not actualized yet. And so, you know, our organization been thinking long and hard about what sort of recommendation that we would feel, given all of the consultant recommendations and in consultation with our constituency, which one felt most accurate in dealing with the world the way that it is now, and also looking at what's planned for the future. And option B is rising to the surface for us, which is, you know, really addressing the congestion in I-5, recognizing there is a diversity of transportation options for folks who are living, working, accessing services in that area. And until we sort of have the sort of surface street improvements necessary along the 205 corridor and adjacent streets, and the transit service that we desperately need in that area, that would be wise to phase it. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. I'm Ann McInerney-Ogle, Mayor for the City of Vancouver. First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in the advisory. I do think Oregon probably made a little mistake. This was the Portland-Vancouver metro area value pricing opportunity, as I'm sure what they meant, because we are the second largest city in the region, and we do appreciate knowing that you understand that this is a regional transportation system and that you brought us to the table. In addressing question number one, as we're looking at what mitigation would be, it may require Oregon constitutional changes. Revenue generated in this particular project may not be able to cross the Columbia River and mitigate the costs to our low-income individuals or to our CTRAN. CTRAN is the fourth largest transit organization serving the state of Oregon, by the way, and funding may not be able to cross that river. So we are looking for that opportunity. Also to exempt CTRAN from tolls. Of course, we have buses on shoulders, and we are the only fixed route transit in the I-5-205 corridor for you. So we are hoping that once this might be implemented, that you take a look at those opportunities. We will also be looking to see that there's very little diversion from I-5 across 14 SR 500s, the state routes in Clark County in between all the different roads and such. We have not discussed, the Vancouver City Council meets on Monday. We, of course, had this opportunity. We'll know on question number 2 where we would like to recommend you apply congestion pricing. But I do want to point out that your staff has been extremely responsive to Clark County with 2 very large open houses, both in January and April, that were very well attended. We've also published in all of our information about 2 to 3 weeks before each of those opportunities. We blasted out to all of on our social media, and then again a week prior. We have all of this on our banners, and I'm addressing question number 3 there. To advertise each meeting, we have videos that we prepare that are on our website, and we've shown those continually in March and April. We've had we have 67 neighborhoods that we publish information for every Monday throughout, or every week throughout April, and most of March we've pushed that outreach opportunity. We televise all of our city council workshops, and then you can video stream them to bring them back up. But I would like to thank the PAC staff for that incredible outreach and engagement, because that's what we expect when we are working on the I-5 bridge replacement project.
Thank you very much. I know that this partnership is really important, and so thank you for making time to be here today as well.
Absolutely.
And we will, that's a critical piece to this. We want to make sure that as we think about it, it's not just an Oregon-centric of equity and caring for populations, so that funding question will be a critical one.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes. Ms. Jarvis.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Boehne, members of the Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today, and I also want to thank Commissioner O'Halloran and Commissioner Simpson for their guidance on this project. It has been very inclusive, more inclusive than I had understood at the beginning, and I think I did want to quickly comment that I felt like we were provided from the consultants some very good background information, and the information that came out of the focus groups and stuff was very helpful to me in assessing this particular concept. The representation on the PAC has included jurisdictional boundaries, user categories, interest groups. So there have been some consistent themes that have emerged from different users and perspectives that you need to consider as you move forward. But I do think it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to meet the objectives of every group. So our perspective is we would caution you to consider first the purpose and the usage of this highway network as your first priority as you look forward with your solutions. From a general perspective, OTA supports the concept of congestion pricing or value pricing as a strategy to address congestion in the Portland metro region if, and this is a big if, this is done in conjunction with a dedication to investing in additional lanes and capacity improvements. There's been a great deal of discussion that's taken place about the diversion that will occur with value pricing, and it needs to be noted that the local governments are rightly concerned about this, since these roadways may already be at their peak capacity as well. I know because I had to take one of them this morning to get here. We would note that it's important to consider tolling both I-5 and some portion of I-205 to address the likely diversion that would occur if only one of these road networks is tolled. Trucks running through Oregon, rather than delivering into the downtown Portland area, use I-205 already because of the bottleneck of the Rose Quarter. But deliveries into the port or the industrial areas of Portland require travel on I-5. And you know, it almost goes without saying, but sometimes we need to be reminded that that section at the Rose Quarter is the only two-lane section of urban freeway between Mexico and Canada. So capacity improvements need to be addressed in that region. From a timing perspective, it's important to consider when to implement this tolling strategy. And our recommendation is that it should be implemented either during or after construction, and that would be more appropriate than implementing tolling with the promise of future improvements. One of the most important considerations for freight in this discussion will be whatever is implemented addresses the high cost of congestion that the freight industry is already experiencing today, and includes a strategy that improves throughput for freight. Some discussion is centered around tolled lanes, but most tolling strategies, most tolled lane tolling strategies exclude freight. So it's conceivable that if that's the solution that's put forward, it could drastically reduce capacity rather than improving it for us. And lastly, we need to remember that tolling revenue, as defined by Article 9, Section 3A of the Oregon Constitution, is directed to Oregon's roads, highways, and bridges. So the tolling revenue should be part of the OTC strategy to provide additional capacity to the Portland Metro region's highway network. Thank you.
Getting used to these mics now. Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Brendan Finn from the City of Portland. And first of all, on behalf of Mayor Ted Wheeler and Transportation Commissioner Dan Saltzman, want to thank you for providing this venue. I, too, want to put thanks and props out to Commissioners Simpson and O'Halloran for guiding the process that we've been going through. I've attended all of the meetings, and they've been informative and productive. And I just think everyone has been able, with our varying perspectives, to get out what we need to and to learn what we needed to learn to be able to make an informed recommendation to you. I could probably repeat a lot of the things that Councilor Dirksen said, but I probably wouldn't do it as articulately as he did. So we'll associate his remarks with the City of Portland regarding the need to reduce congestion. That's why this process was started. The City of Portland was out early on this in adopting a resolution unanimously that endorsed this process and the congestion pricing effort. Through this, what we've learned through what the data has driven our decision, or the City of Portland's position on option C being the best option to move forward with to analyze and then that also can be broken down into other segments if that's the direction that's heading in. So with that, we look forward to, while it won't be me, continuing to weigh in on the process. You'll be hearing directly from the mayor and the city council on how they see this move forward. But again, want to thank the other committee members. I've learned a lot from them and have enjoyed getting to have the relationships with them and learning some of their concerns. And I think it's been a great venue. So just want to thank folks for that and look forward to, the city looks forward to continuing being a partner on that process as the jurisdiction that's probably experiencing this congestion the most. So, thank you.
For the record, my name is Paul Savas. I'm a Clackamas County Commissioner. Chair Boehne, members of the Commission, thank you for hosting us here today, and special thanks to Commissioners Simpson and Holloran for their participation on the committee. I have a lot to say. And I've been making notes through a lot of good points being discussed with my fellow members on the PAC committee as well as on the committee, as well as the earlier comments from some of the speakers in our public comment. A little bit about me. So for the newest commissioner understands maybe a little bit about my background. I've been part of transportation committees for the last 20 years. I've been commuting in this area for 40 years. So I know my way around the region pretty well. And as a small business owner, I had to travel literally to all areas, including other counties and Vancouver as well, Clark County. I'm a member of JPAC. Matter of fact, that was our first meeting this morning. I'm a member, or the vice chair of the R1 Act, so I'm in this room quite often. I was in this meeting 2 Mondays ago as the co-chair or the vice chair of Regional 1 Act. Tomorrow I'll be in this room again talking about transit as a result of the STIF committee. And on Monday I was in this room on our tolling committee. So I'm sitting in the tolling committee, I sit in the transit committee, and been a founder of the C4 Clackamas County Coordinating Committee, members of all the jurisdictions in Clackamas County. And so I have a pretty good, deep background in transportation locally. All that said, I think it's important to acknowledge that the system we have today, and there's a lot of metro regions, and what's the saying, if you've seen one metro region, you've seen one metro region. And we say that with counties as well. And Chair Boehne, as a commissioner in Deschutes County, that's a common thing we say. You've seen one county, you've seen one county. What's unique about this region, in my experience in the last 20 some odd years with this region politically, is that number one, there is this distinct difference between the counties and their needs, and also where the dollars have gone, the investments that have been made, and particularly where the investments have not been made. There has been inequity in that regard. And when we talk about regional government or a regional body, we ought to be thinking about the region as a region, not how we divvy the money up by population, because that's not really regionalism. Regionalism is addressing the needs where they're needed. And if we were a water agency or we were a utility, we would not have areas where there's no service or terribly underserved areas. So the model this region has employed as far as distribution of transit investments, I think has been imbalanced, and Clackamas County is on the short end of that stick. I do, as an elected official since 2001 in different capacities, I have developed the strategy of listening intently to people, and also trying to empathize and sympathize where I best can. And I do feel that when I listen to someone, whether they're a member of this committee or a member of the public, speak about their particular viewpoint, I do realize where they're standing, where they're coming from. And I often agree with what they say, even though where I'm sitting and standing in Clackamas County is a completely different picture. So we have to recognize that, and we all have responsibilities, and we all are up here representing our bodies as best we can. With that said, I want to say there's two I-205s. There's the I-205 portion that is north of, let's say, the town center, Multnomah County primarily, and there's the area south. And if you look at the grid structure of the region, it's it's non-existent in Clackamas County. It's just the lay of the land, it's the way things are, it's lack of investment, a number of things that built that. I brought with me a map that we used this morning at JPAC. It's basically a transit map, talks about, you can see basically the visual of what our regional plan is for transit, but it also shows really what's existing and what's not there really in Clackamas County is we don't have very much transit service. We have areas where we're not only underserved, not only very severely underserved, we have areas with population where there is no service. So as it relates to the south part of I-205, a 14-mile stretch between the town center and Wilsonville where there is no alternative to get from point A to point B, none. And now, where just geographically and from a highway standpoint, understand what that is. Town center is Sunnyside Road, the main corridor in and out of Happy Valley, the fastest growing city in Clackamas County. Population is just going crazy. It's gone up since I've moved here. I think it's 10, 15 times the size of what it used to be. So that's the only highway really going in and out. The next highway below that is 224, the new expressway. The next highway down from there is the 212 corridor. Then we have the 213. Then we have 99E. And then we have Highway 43. And then we're off to Wilsonville. That said, we don't have much in the way of transit at any of those corridors. We don't have much of a way of flow connections. So with that said, realizing that there's no alternatives and realizing that some would criticize and say that basically certain citizens and groups of people and areas and cities will be severely impacted from diversion, which is a huge issue for us because we're already experiencing diversion because of congestion. And just last week, I talked to a very passionate parent who lost her daughter on one of the described third lanes of I-205, which was Stafford Road. In front of her home, she's had 4 accidents, one of which was a rollover, okay, in the last 45 days. Okay. So this diversion on Willamette Drive, the diversion on Stafford Road, Borland Road, Johnson Road, Highway 43, Highway 99E, through Canby, through everywhere, it's bad. So your studies from that I gathered from looking at the numbers from the PAC 3 meeting materials indicated that there's currently 50,000 diverted trips per day in the region because of this pent-up demand for capacity being diverted off the highways. And if we implement option C, or it wasn't option, it was concept C, that's another 80,000 additional. That's a total of 130,000 diverted trips. But, and this is highly technical and it's easy to get confused, but that's on the presumption, I believe, and I could be wrong, presumption that we added a lane on I-205 and we fixed the Rose Quarter bottleneck. There were some presumptions in there, but currently there's about 50,000 pent-up trips, and we are experiencing that. We've had the mayor, city councilor of West Lynn here at our meetings talking about that. This is a huge, huge issue. So I want to just talk about responsibilities. So I don't disagree that congestion pricing, value pricing is a tool, but it's not a solution. I think we need to be very, very clear about that. We're not static in our population. We're growing, and we have to think about that. I want to appreciate both Commissioner Simpson and O'Halloran for recognizing that in her comments at a closing of this meeting and the closing of a previous meeting. And I was a little bit dismayed, frankly, that option 4 was just dismissed. And that was a staff decision, and I asked for financials about that decision. I never got the financials because I want to really understand this a little bit better. I've been part of public processes for 20 years, and I understand the predicament that legislatures directed this commission to act on and get a decision or a recommendation by the end of this year. But this is the most compressed public process period I've ever seen for such a complex matter. Just one sliver of a project, and it took a year and a half of public process to understand it, to make a good recommendation. So I just don't think there's been adequate time to really analyze all this. Excuse me. get a little bit worked up about this too, so I apologize if I seem a little bit passionate. But I think the responsibilities for the OTC or Region 1 or ODOT in itself, I think the responsibility is to keep highway traffic on the highways. It doesn't belong on local roads. This value pricing, tolling, congestion pricing, however you want to put it, if you realize you're going to be pushing off traffic that belongs on the highways, on the interstates, on the local roads, that's not a responsible strategy, in my opinion. Sorry for the strong comments. It's not a responsible strategy. That burden's going to be passed on to local jurisdictions. I'm here as an owner-operator, representing an owner-operator, the Clackamas County. We own and operate the roads, as do our cities, and not all people on the board have that responsibility. And when I get a constituent calling me about her losing her daughter in a previous accident on this road, it wasn't happened to be in the last 45 days, I want to clarify that. But we have just a number of examples of the danger. So I think that's a factor. So I want to get to the questions. I don't want to belabor this. Based on what you've learned and heard, how will we know if we've been successful if congestion pricing is implemented? So to that question, they're turned around from my paperwork here. So yeah, so I had on my paperwork I actually had number 2. So I'm going to read. So I would say that success might look like we see infrastructure capacity projects underway, identified underway, and actually identified funding for them. That there's a means to get there. That we don't have any diversion on local roads. Highway traffic that belongs on the highways needs to stay on the highways. And also that traffic flow improves, throughput. That's a very key word here. The word capacity, the word adding lanes, some of the, I'm going to be really kind when I say this, but confusion about adding lanes. When people say adding lanes, they'll just fill up and there won't be any added capacity. Well, that might be true. If you add a lane where there's no capacity need, they will just fill up. You don't add a lane between 2 bottlenecks and leave the bottlenecks there. Okay, it's just mathematical engineering. Excuse me, it's just engineering, not mathematical. So throughput's important. Again, we're not static. We're a growing region. We need to think about commerce. Commerce pays taxes. Taxes fund the legislature. They fund schools. They fund everything else. We got to realize that we need to grow the jobs. Our population in Clackamas County is growing faster than we're growing housing, faster than we're growing jobs. People need to travel as a result. We need to understand that. Question number 2, is there anything you want to convey to the OTC that we should apply towards congestion pricing? Well, I mentioned financials. I'd really like to, I think we need to have more information on the financials about option 4. The Chair Bernard of the County Commission, my other colleagues on the commission have talked recently, very recently, about this, and we don't like the idea of dismissing the 2 concepts in which you value price a lane or an express lane. We feel that people will pay for a reduction in congestion, but tolling everyone on this particular stretch of highway is just not acceptable. It's going to have problems, but we do support a concept in which we look at a price lanes. Now, maybe there's some interim steps that can be taken to fund that section of 205. And so we are open for consideration of concept E. Excuse me, the combination of B, is it B and E, right? I believe that was the one. So that was the staff recommendation. So we'd like to see basically further consideration, but again, we're not at the point where we want to endorse any of those because we don't feel they've been adequately evaluated and we don't understand the impacts if you did do concept E, tolling Abernathy Bridge, all lanes, and tolling sections of that diversion issue. And I'm sure that the mayor of Oregon City would as we've tried to discuss, not knowing where we're headed, and the mayors of all the other cities in that region would have some huge issues with that. Gladstone, West Linn, Lake Oswego, and Oregon City, because they're really close to that bridge. So what else would success look like? A path towards responding to future capacity needs. Again, that's just about growth. So the last one, what steps have you taken? So I've been reporting to the BCC, Board of County Commissioners. I've been responding to C4 as a representative. I've been attending public meetings. I've been asked to attend public meetings and speak. I spoke to our business alliances, chambers of commerce, Economic Development Commission. I've gone door to door in a campaign. Fortunately, this is behind me now. But the point of the matter is, I've been talking to a lot of people, and I'll just tell you, there's overwhelming consensus, overwhelming, strong, passionate belief that if you toll our highways, that those money should be invested in capacity to solve the problem. Again, we believe that tolling is a tool. It is not a solution. So I could go on, but I will cut it short. We have impacted communities. I did hear, as Vivian Satterfield was speaking earlier, we also have tremendous challenges when it comes to minority communities, low-income communities, people in poverty, our rural areas not being served, students who need to get back and forth with school bus challenges currently, all to say that in Clackamas County, if you are in an area where you have no transit service, you're worse off. If you're 200% of poverty, you're worse off in Clackamas County than you are anywhere in this tri-county region or four-county region, frankly, because of no service. So I think that's a point I've been trying to make at the Transit Committee with this new money, that we need to explore areas about meeting those needs. And again, I ask anyone to get this map or any TriMet map and look at where the service is and look at where it's not. These are huge impacts for Clackamas County residents. Thank you.
Well, let me just say that without the passion, we can't really get to the substance. So thank you very much. And I do hear you. So that diversion piece is not lost on us. And I am grateful, House Bill 2017, that investment for additional transit was not to support existing operations, it was for expanded capacity. So I do hope that those conversations are going well.
I'll quote you on that tomorrow morning. That message is not being resonated down to the committee level.
Happy to help. Hi.
Hi,
Phil.
Commissioner Bainey, Commissioners, Director Garrett, fellow PAC members. FHWA very much appreciates being part of this discussion here today, as well as the committee. We are part of the committee as an ex officio member capacity, and we appreciate that. You know, I'll say it's been very evident from my vantage point that ODOT and the Commission have brought together a very diverse group to discuss a very difficult issue. You know, we're talking about a congested state, congestion here in this region, and introducing tolling as part of a strategy to address that issue. And it's a tough, complex discussion. And I'll say over the series of meetings we've had, the ODOT and their team has helped us to understand the issue. I don't know that we fully understand it, but to the point to where we can engage productively. There's good dialogue, there's good feedback. Again, very diverse views, which I do believe will lead to a recommendation that will help to inform the Commission in creating a vision for a long-term strategy in addressing congestion. So, yeah, I share the accolades to Commissioner Simpson and O'Halloran for the leadership you're providing in encouraging dialogue, in directing ODOT's and the consultant staff to help us understand technically what this is we're dealing with. And I look forward to finishing up the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so parting comments, questions, observations?
I'll just say, clearly there's obviously a lot of passion here. I almost feel like we should probably get a group hug or something, you know, but I am adamantly supportive of the process and the amount of due diligence and outreach and communication efforts that the department has taken in order to ensure that folks are aware and engaged within this process. And it goes to say, at least from the Commission standpoint and expectation, that as a result of House Bill 2017, there was a lot of focus and attention around transparency and accountability for the department moving forward. And I think it's a very important testament that with those pieces in place, that staff and all the other constituents involved have been very active in the community, getting as much feedback as we possibly can throughout this process. And even though there's going to be difference of opinions throughout the process. I don't think it's going to be perfect. It's not going to be a kumbaya, but the ultimate issue here is we're trying to solve a problem, and the goal, which I think we've been pretty well at thus far, is putting our personal agendas aside to try to figure out how do we solve our biggest problem in Portland right now, which is congestion. Even though we know we're talking about it from a transportation standpoint, and there's so many other pieces that relate to this, as Paul alluded to and others have identified. But this is just the beginning of the conversation. And hopefully, as a result of this, it'll trigger on to other pieces within this urban region and the growth and the challenges that we're facing in order to achieve true prosperity for all taxpayers and residents of the city and region. So, and I'll refer to my 51% co-chair.
I'm 49%, sir. But again, I want to thank the members of the PAC for being involved in this issue. I think we will do our best as a commission to try to come up with some ideas that we will have to consider, Madam Chair, for how we move forward with our recommendation to FHWA. And I think the intent is to make sure that we are being very sensitive to adversely impacted communities, those who don't have the ability to incur additional costs, to environmental issues, to not having people feel like they're singled out. And I think we should look to the examples of how congestion pricing is being effectively used, how it's being effectively used in Washington State and our other neighbors, and what models and what lessons we can learn from that. And I do think we need to look at what options we are giving people if their cost of commuting is going up, and they're paying a price by being caught in congestion. Freight pays a price by being caught in it. And I think we have to look at what is the cost. As we all know, infrastructure does not come free. We have learned in this process that nobody wants to pay for it. Right. So, but people do want to ease the tension, and I think there is not a silver bullet. That it's adding capacity, it's creating options, it's looking at transit. We have to look at things that we haven't fully explored, HOV and carpooling. I think if you look at other regions of the country, it's done, with greater magnitude. And have we really maximized that? And so again, there's not an easy answer here. I think we know we can't produce enough revenue to solve this problem. The population in the region, and that's Vancouver and Portland, is growing far more quickly than we can build our way to address the capacity. And I think we have to acknowledge the fact that people will still use automobiles and trucks, and but also looking at rail and the waterways and cycling and more transit and more HOV and carpooling. Just, let's look at all of it and figure out holistically what we can do. And let's look at where's the real congestion. It's not just I-5 and I-205. It's 26, it's 84, it's 405, it's 217, and it's 80 and 84. And if you look at 84 and 26, they have max alternatives. So, I mean, I think we really need to look at this in a big picture and define the what it is that we want to do, and then figure out how we go about doing it. Congestion pricing is not something you're going to do all at once. You're going to have to take steps and baby steps, and you're going to have to do it incrementally. And again, try to do our best to mitigate the unintended consequences, which are things like diversion and what those mean. but really to do get the best information available and how we address those concerns and make a decision to move forward. But doing nothing is not an option. We as a commission have an obligation to do something here. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. And again, I think if opinions and complaints could pave roads, we wouldn't have a problem here. So, but there's everybody has a point of view on it, and I think we'll try to get our arms around it and come up with something that we can actually materialize into action.
Well, thank you again both for your leadership on this particular issue, and thank you for the investment of time. We look forward to the hearing how the next meeting goes, and really appreciate all that you've put in to make sure that we have a great solution in front of us. So thank you. I know that we are running a little bit off schedule, but we do have some time at the back end of the agenda as well. So I'm going to abbreviate Ms. Silva a little bit. Is she? I think that's next. Okay, only because in your packet we do have the update. Wanted to draw your attention. It was in the pre-meeting packet. So unless we have questions or specific, I'm not sure how, I just would maybe ask the commission members if they have questions or particular items that they'd like you to address, that we could go over that. If not, we might just go ahead and review it because it's in our packet and let you go about your day. So let me look with commission members. Do we have particular, one thing I do want to note is that this document is very useful, and I appreciate the commitment of time that you've put into it and capturing the needs that we've had, making sure that we're tracking the right pieces and we know where we are. So do we have any questions, or it's an informational item?
It's great.
So
keep up the good work.
I think you're free to go. All right. So Jerry will be, I think next we have, I'm sorry?
Unless she wants to say something.
Okay, great. All right, so let's move on to item F, and this is a request for approval of adopting amendments.
Actually, Madam Chair, we jumped over E.
Did we? Oh, I'm sorry. We have PK, so we want to make sure that we get the legislative key performance measures. Thank you very much. Critical action item. Please, Phil, join us. Nope, that's fine, but thank you for keeping me honest about the agenda. And the exciting part about this conversation is not only that you're joining us today, nice to see you, but it's also that this was the first homework assignment for the Continuous Improvement Advisory Committee. And they had a very quick turnaround to some really important information for the outcomes that we're tracking for the department. So thank you for your leadership in helping to guide that process. And I want to thank, I know we have a couple CIAC members here, but that new committee is off and running, and this is their first product to the OTC. So excited that they have their fingerprints on it as well. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning, Chair Boehne and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Phil Case, Performance Management Chief here at ODOT. And I'll keep this pithy because I know we're trying to get back on track. But as you know, the annual ODOTs and other state agencies are required to report to the legislature our key performance measures, and of course are approved by the legislature as part of the biennial budget process. At ODOT, performance management and key performance measures provide for a number of purposes: transparency and accountability to the public and decision makers to drive desired behaviors, outcomes based on strategic goals, and support and inform performance-based decision making and effective resource allocation. The performance management leadership's recommended key performance measures were reviewed and accepted by the appropriate division administrator, ODOT director, and entire ODOT executive staff. And as you alluded to, on April 24th, the Continuous Improvement Advisory Committee agreed with the proposed key performance updates and passed them on to the Commission for review and acceptance.
And a quick thank you to Commissioner Van Broeklen for leading that effort and for your commitment of time as well.
Sometimes I feel like that. All right, before you on the slide are the key performance measures that we're not recommending changes to at this time. Of course, these key performance measures align with ODOT's mission, vision, goals, and strategies. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about these because we're not making any changes at this time. And the same for these, we're not recommending any changes to these key performance measures at this time. We anticipate there will be future work on these, but that'll be the next round and following. Now kind of on to the meat of the conversation. We have 2 additional key performance measures that we are recommending. The first is transit riders per capita. The current key performance measure focuses on senior and disabled transit service only. ODOT recommends deleting the existing measure and replacing it with a more inclusive measure supported by stakeholders, and it's similar to the Oregon Public Transit Plan performance measures. It reflects demand usage and aligns with ODOT's expanded role in public transportation under HB 2017 Statewide Transportation Investment Fund. And then the next is the total lane miles rate is moderately congested or worse. Currently, ODOT does not have a mobility measure that measures congestion on the state highway system as a key performance measure. This proposed measure compares traffic volumes to capacity, and it's basically a measure of average annual daily traffic over capacity on the state highway system. If it's a rating of 9 or higher, then it's considered moderately congested. That's the point at which, when you're kind of tapping the brakes in congestion, all it takes is one thing, and the system just kind of starts shutting down. So that's kind of that tipping point is where 9 is on that rating. This addresses both passenger vehicles and freight, as well as both severity and duration of the congestion, and captures reliability reasonably well. Obviously, as segments with higher traffic volumes to capacity ratios are likely to have reliability issues as well. It's relatively easy to understand and somewhat reflects performance of investment strategies as a higher level measure. It's responsive to both road supply, in other words, widening, as well as reducing traffic volumes through demand management strategies such as transportation options and road pricing, things like that we talked a little bit about today. But it's not inherently about widening highways necessarily. We are also recommending the modification of 2 key performance measures. Construction projects on budget is the first one, and that is the percent of projects for which total construction expenditures are within 10% of its baseline construction authorization. This will replace ODOT's current measure, which gauges overall performance, bringing the construction program within budget, but allows for significant variance among individual projects. So in other words, this will more closely align our measure with peer states and allows for the appropriate rebaselining of contract authorizations. The old measure, the one we have now, is an aggregate measure, so basically it's a program-wide. So we had a lot of variation that was kind of covered up. So this one will identify it as percent of projects, so it's a project-by-project measure. So it's a lot more fidelity there, and that was one of the recommendations that we wanted to bring forward. And then construction projects on time, the percentage of state-administered projects that have satisfactorily completed all on-site work within 90 days of the baseline last construction completion date. Again, this more closely aligns with our peer states and accounts for the appropriate rebaselining of contract completion times of on-time measurement. The old measurement methodology did not, again, highlight the variability of smaller and medium-sized projects. I know I'm covering this pretty quick, but please,
Fine, we're good on time,
oh,
so
okay.
go ahead and
All right. And then finally, measures we recommend are no longer being reported as key performance measures. That's not to say we don't continue to track and report it otherwise. Special transit riderships, those will be included in the new transit ridership per capita. Rail crossing incidents, the Federal Rail Administration reports that during recent years, Oregon has been in or near the top 20 states for the fewest number of motor vehicle incidents at public rail crossings. And rail crossings are a relatively minor contributor to the total number of transportation system fatalities. So, jobs from construction spending, this is an indicator, a mathematical calculation based on construction funding from the legislature and the federal government. And we have very little influence on this number at all. Incident response, we have a focused strategy to quickly clear traffic incidents and reduce travel delay. It is one of many important components for improving operations, management, and the safety of our state highway system. Traffic incidents account for approximately 25% of the congestion on the highway system, so that's why it's such an important thing to us. And although we continue to track this performance at the program level daily, it is only a slice of the system mobility picture and does not equate to a strategic level measure that's going to be driving significant and long-term policy and planning level decisions. This key performance measures it varies by only a small percentage point and has a low standard deviation. It's going to continue to be reported quarterly at our OTC quarterly performance report, so you're going to see it regularly. And then finally, FISH passage, it does not rise to the level of a strategic or agency-wide key performance measure. Our ODOT's FISH passage, our FISH habitat improvement strategy no longer matches this key performance measure. In other words, we're measuring what we're not doing necessarily. We continue to do the work, but we have different priorities now. A recent culvert management agreement with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife focuses less on culvert replacement and more on off-site habitat mitigation. These activities, they're more cost-effective, and the point is to help the fish, so it's a more cost-effective way to improve fish habitat at a lower cost. So. All right, in closing, I'd like to say that the Continuous Improvement Advisory Committee has given us some great ideas to form the basis of work for our upcoming next go-around, and we'll be talking about that throughout the summer and into the next year. We also expect that the Commission will be presented with the key performance measure performance results later this summer, in the next couple of months or so. And at this point, I would like to answer any questions you might have and make the request that for your approval to forward these changes on to the legislature. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Great job. One question, I know it came up early on when we were talking about the KPMs. We report now and have, because we've been tracking the condition of the system. And so we're essentially creating almost a dashboard similar to what we have for ourselves for the legislature of what we're measuring. So is that part of this? Should that be part of this? Where does that show up, the reporting of the condition of the system, which we report on for the legislature as well? I know that's separate, it's in the House bill, but was there discussion that should be a part of this as well, or no?
Well, we have an annual performance progress report that we put together of all of our key performance measures that includes all of our performance. So if you're referring to maybe specific asset condition like bridge or pavement or transit vehicles or something like that.
So it's a requirement within House Bill 2017. It seems like they've called that out as a specific critical piece.
Yes.
I'm wondering the highlighting of that. I know that it's already being tracked and measured, but is that something that we should be adding to the short list of things that they are monitoring, which we're already submitting that to them?
Yes.
I'm just wondering if that should be included on this, or if it's its own standalone. And
I'm going to get out in front of my skis a little bit and say that specific to our key performance measures, we report, like we said, the House bill requirements are different, and as you well know, and I know that we have a team that's developed protocols for reporting for the locals, for counties and cities. Is that you're talking about including that in here as well?
Phil, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe we didn't change the condition reports on bridges or pavements. So
we did not.
Those still exist as key performance measures that we will track. So
and
that
report
has
within this
absolutely
document
it's,
as well.
It's
okay.
part of the KPMs.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That was the part that I wasn't sure if that was still part of the connection. Wonderful. Yeah. See, you answered it, didn't you?
There we go.
Please.
So just real fast, I'm seeing the recommended deletions, and it has jobs from construction spending, but I'm a little confused as to the whole context of that, for one, and two, how did that one get shortlisted as part of the deletions? If I'm thinking about HB 2017, as you guys probably are aware now, I'm really adamant about being able to tell the narrative about the return on investment of public dollars into that $5.3 billion. And so since this jobs is an important indicator related to that and tells an important story, I'm curious as to why it would be deleted.
That's a very good question. One of our directions when we were told to reassess our key performance measures are what are some of those measures that are under your control? And this is one of those ones that, generally speaking, is an indicator. It's simply based on a couple of different factors. What's the economy doing and how much money has been spent? And then we put it into a calculation, and then a number comes out. 9.77 jobs were created for every $1 million spent. Looking backwards, as we look at the economy, we could say, hey, you know what, the economy was doing better, or is doing better, was doing worse last year, so it was only 9.12 jobs created last year. Nothing changed but the economy. So we can't really control the economy. So as an indication of jobs created, that it does meet that need, but it's not a performance measure in the traditional sense. In other words, we can't control it. We can't do anything that's going to move that needle. It is simply a mathematical calculation. Like, we can never make 2 + 2, and I'm way oversimplifying, but we can't control what the economy does as an agency. And so we've been directed to do that. So those numbers, we're still reporting those, and we can make a phone call in 10 minutes and get an answer. So it's not like it takes a lot of work to do this, but there's a lot of information in the one pager that will kind of describe where it comes from and why it is the way it is. Originally, like you said, it's important to acknowledge those jobs that are created. I'm not saying it's not, but it's not something we can control either.
I understand. Okay, it makes sense now. I just wanted to make sure that, given that that is something that's out of our control, that we can still actually kind of monitor it and make sure that we're articulating that and being transparent as it relates to the ROI for the public dollar.
Oh, absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely, yeah. We still track it, and anyone who wants to know, it goes out as a regular report and things like that. But as a key performance measure, it doesn't really fit the need there.
Gotcha, Phil.
First, I want to thank you for the good work that you've been doing on this, and to the members of the CIAC who did a great job at the first meeting, given the fact that the timing on this topic didn't allow much time to get very deep in it, since it's part of the budget process and we're under deadline. So with that as context, I move approval of the KPMs as proposed.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Maybe just a point of clarification on the rail crossing incident. Could you just clarify why we would not keep that in?
Okay, so as far as rail crossing incidents, and again, I talk more about it in the one-pagers that we currently report, it is a relatively small number. And if you look back to the 1970s, where we had over 200 incidents, we're now down in the teens, and it's kind of bouncing around in the teens. The last couple of years, it's been ticking up a little bit, and that kind of reflects what's been happening nationwide as far as safety measures in general. We still report that to the Federal Rail Administration, so we're still tracking it and we still report it. But again, in order to fulfill the directive to focus on those things that we can control, we can, because somewhat, but most of the public crossings, the majority of the public crossings, have operating equipment. And a lot of these incidents, unfortunately, are some folks who will drive their vehicle into the side of a moving train. Or they will, unfortunately, maybe decide to end their life that way. So the numbers are relatively small, but in most all cases, the crossings, the equipment's there, the lights are working, and people either make the choice to run that or run into the side of it, and things like that. And the one pager will actually break down very specific incidents of some of these indications. That's not to say that we're not concerned about it. It's not to say that it's not important, because it's very important. But is it something we can really move the needle on, and is it something that we make strategic level decisions on? Not necessarily.
Well, to me, it seems like we definitely have a role in it, right? It's not just railroads. It's something, and certainly if someone in your family is affected by it, it's not a small number. Absolutely. So I think that, to me, it just seems like if ODOT has a role, and it's something measurable, and it's something that impacts safety and human life, and at rail road interchanges, that it's something that we ought to keep an eye on. How will we know if we're doing better or worse relative to status quo. And so I'm asking, and if there's a logical answer to it, then it may make sense to take it out as a key performance measure. But
I think, Madam Chair, if I may, and Phil, correct me if I deviate from the path here. But Commissioner, we don't completely dismiss the issue. We just track it at a portfolio level. So Mr. Guard and his rail professionals will continue to track this in their portfolio here. So we'll have opportunities to see if something starts to change, if the trend that has been held into the teens starts to move in a direction, and it warrants greater scrutiny.
So I get that.
Yeah.
But why would we not track it as a key performance measure? I mean, why is there? Am I missing something here? I mean, why? We're tracking it anyway. Why wouldn't we?
So let me just going back to the maybe this will be helpful. What I learned in the CIAC meeting were a couple of things that I didn't know. One was that we track a number of key performance measures that we don't report out as part of this budgeting process. And so I suspect this is one of them from what the director just said. I think what we were trying to contend with was this budget note that the legislature gave us, which is in the memo that we have on this subject, which refers to the McKinsey report and says that ODOT should consolidate its KPMs with a focus on developing and tracking performance measures that align with the near term, so that's one concept, near term, not long term, goals of the agency, and on areas, quote, within the ability of the department to influence and achieve. So we started talking about what met those criteria because this goes in the state budget process. What I think the Ways and Means Committee is looking for is a set of key performance measures that are short-term, achievable, and that through actions by the department we can influence. And that became the basis of trying to make a cut line, because literally there are hundreds of indices we could and do track, but for purposes of the budget process, which of those should we be reporting up to the Ways and Means Committee that adhered to the direction of this budget note? That's the way I understood the project that we're about.
Commissioner, I understand, but would you agree that it is a fundamental mission of the department to protect human life?
Yes.
Would you agree that there are budgetary ramifications of rail grade crossings?
Yes.
So why would we not track it? If we're doing it anyway, why would we not put it in our key performance measures? I understand we're tracking it. I'm just trying to understand why, if we're doing it anyway, why wouldn't we include it in this?
I think it's fair, and we just made a decision to drop it down. But Commissioner, if you want it on there, just say so. I mean, it's
okay,
that simple.
I want it on there.
I think it's done then.
And my motion is amended to include that measure.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a good discussion, I think. Thank you for raising it. I understand some of the complexities around what we can actually, I suspect from the 70s we also have less at-grade crossings and a variety of other things that we've been working on as well. And those are all budgetary, programmatic ways in which we add safety to the system. So I think that's, these are all important pieces to what we're tracking and sending to the legislature. So please.
Yeah, and I just say, to Commissioner O'Halloran, I think anything that any one of us thinks is important for a reason to have on this list that we're sending out through the budget process. I'm not going to make an argument that things that are critically important in the context of overall safety at crossings is not worthy of consideration. We were just trying to draw a line to try and be sensitive to the budget note in the direction of the legislature, and you can draw that line to include this indices or not, and I'm fine either way.
Yeah, I think I could go through this list and draw a line through all kinds of stuff that's on it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's, it didn't seem arbitrary to me.
Great. Well, it's on the list, and with that, do we have any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Now, back to Jerry. Next, we have an action item, and this is the request for approval to adopt the amendments to the OTP and the Oregon Highway Plan, associated findings, and we did have some comments that were submitted by Metro, Commissioner Lycan, and then also Mr. Courtright. So I wanted to just make sure that those are also part of the discussion. And Jerry, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay. So, good morning, I think by a couple more minutes. For the record, my name is Jerry Bohart. I'm the Transportation Development Division Administrator, and I'm here to hopefully get some final concurrence on amendments to the Oregon Transportation Plan and the Oregon Highway Plan. I think this is the third time we've been here. We did, I think, a full board presentation a couple months ago before we released the federal performance measures for public comment, and then we did have a public hearing last month. What you have in your packet is the amendments to the OTP and the OHP. You also have a table identifying the public comments. So very quickly, I think actually in a meeting, and I believe the gentleman's right here, Mr. Kloster, identified some concerns with what we had in our packet relative to targets and the transportation planning rule, and wanting to really provide clarity that because these are federal performance measures that they apply to our agency because they have to come up with their own targets, each of the MPOs, and also that did not apply to the TPR as we're looking at comprehensive plans and rezones and that sort of thing. So great eye on his part, and we provided some clarifying language within that. Commissioner Lycan had some concerns about safety performance measures. Completely agree. There is a series of federal safety performance measures. You all as a commission actually already addressed that when you approved our safety action plan a couple of months ago. So we did address his concern. It's just not identified within this document. And then finally, and I believe Mr. Courtright would like to speak again, that there was a federal regulation around GHG emissions. It is sitting in the Office of OMB. I'm trying to think what the acronym stands for, budget, and it will likely be repealed. So we didn't feel that it was important at this time, if it's going to be repealed from a federal standpoint, whether or not to put something in there and develop a target for that. So, and we footnote that accordingly. I think his question is whether or not we need a GHG performance measure. And I think we had a discussion on the STS monitoring report last month, and I think we're waiting for some conversations relative to that and what that might look like. And we do recognize that once we finish the public transportation plan, that we'll likely, after conversations with you all this fall, be looking at updating either the Oregon Transportation Plan or the Oregon Highway Plan, and that's probably a fair element to discuss as part of an update to either of those plans. So with that, what I'm really looking for is for approval to amend both the OTP and the OHP, and most importantly that you also approve the findings as well.
So one of the questions that came up, and I appreciate the input that came in through the public hearing, Mr. Courtright's comments in terms of if that were to be repealed, would it not make sense for us to maybe leave it in and then it's a notation that if it's repealed then it drops out, instead of if it's, because there's an assumption here and maybe it's the chicken or the egg, but I do agree that if we have our own performance metrics that we are working on from a state perspective that wouldn't necessarily need to be codified within this document. But comments on that?
We had supported the need for a federal GHG measure. We supported it because it would be at a national level, and so there would be some level of consistency there. Essentially what the measure is doing is measuring the amount of gas that flows into the state, and then you do a calculation about how much GHG emissions are associated with that. I'm not sure it's a measure that is actually helpful in measuring whether or not we're addressing our GHG, because one of the things that we're seeing, and I think the commissioner from Clackamas County talked about just the demographics and how things are growing there. So even though, and we have seen an uptick, I think, in vehicle miles traveled per capita, we've been bringing that down. We're starting to see that just slightly edge forward, but most importantly, just our VMT is increasing because of demographics. So it would be a number that we would probably show continually increasing. We also did not work on a target with each of the MPOs, and most importantly in the work that we did here, we worked with the MPOs as we developed the targets. Most likely a lot of these targets our MPOs are going to be supporting. I think Metro around reliability will probably be looking at something a little bit different. So we would still have some homework to do. The first reporting is not due until October, so we're sort of waiting to see what happens there. So it was a choice that we made to not include it until we absolutely had to.
This gets sent in October? Or that's the first reporting?
That's the first reporting.
My thought is if it's not repealed, then it needs to be in. And if we haven't left it in with the notation that it would drop if it is repealed, I mean...
You could direct us today to do that work, but we don't have those numbers right now. We have to develop a target. So that will take a public process as well.
Do we feel like we're ready? It's an action item. Did I throw a wrench in it? So it sounds like, it would be that we are actually approving the adopted amendments that we would be putting forward with our federal performance requirements.
Madam Chair, I move the approval of the amendments, that we adopt the amendments of the Oregon Transportation Plan and the Oregon Highway Plan and the associated findings that demonstrate compliance with federal performance-based planning requirements, and adopt the findings of compliance with state agency coordinated agreements and Oregon statewide planning goals.
How thorough. Okay, do we have any other further? So we were not taking more public comment? It's not a hearing? Do we need to have a public hearing?
You don't, it's not a public hearing. I will tell you in past practice that the plans, we've been a little bit more flexible, so it really is up to the direction of the commission whether or not you want to do that.
Are they different comments than you've submitted already into the record?
They're largely in the record, but I had a couple of quick points.
Okay, if you want to provide, would you hold your motion for just a moment and we would ask? Okay, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm Bob Courtwright from Salem. You have my comments from March. Let me just highlight 3 quick reasons why I think you should do what we've suggested, and that is to add a GHG performance measure, not as part of what you adopt now, but what you direct the department to do. Again, the first reason is that Oregon has taken a strong position in favor of addressing greenhouse gas emission reductions at the federal level over the last 2 years, culminating in an appeal of the Federal Highway Administration action, and also direction by the governor saying that despite backsliding at the federal level, the state's going to do everything we can to address this issue. This is one of the things that we can do. The second reason you ought to do this is to advance the statewide transportation strategy that you received a report on last month. You found out that we're falling way behind. Having performance measures is a logical first step to figure out where we are and to help figure out how we can get back on track. The third reason that I think you need to do this is because the department, as Jerry has indicated, is really waiting for you to provide direction on this issue. As you know, Chris Hagerbomber and I testified last month on the STS. Among the things we recommended was that the monitoring report be distributed to other agencies because that hadn't happened in the process. What we heard back from staff when we asked about that is they hadn't received any direction from the commission on that or doing anything else, and that they're really waiting for you to provide direction on this issue. So if you want something to happen, if we think that performance monitoring for GHG reduction is important, it's important for the commission to provide that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, that is added flavor to what you had said before, but thank you. So what I'm not hearing, though, is that it would change this particular document, but what I am hearing is that there is a lack of clarity of the commission's direction to the agency possibly on what it is that we would like to see. And so do we have, so let's take the motion first, because we have a motion on the table.
So just a point of clarification. So, and I don't know, Jerry, if this is yours. So for greenhouse gas, would we track it as a performance measure, or would we add it into the plan? As a matter of clarity.
I think the metrics within the plan, but I would look to Jerry
Yeah,
to give us.
I think that's some of the work that we would need to do. And remember, it was just last month that you guys had the presentation on the monitoring report. We did envision at some point that you would want to engage in a conversation, and I think that that would, at that point, talk about what that workload looks like and what those expectations would be. So.
And do we need to develop that a little further? And maybe what I might offer as an alternative is that we do a little work. We can always come back and amend this at the subsequent meeting, but maybe we need to put on paper exactly what it is we want to do and track. And I know you've made a proposal, but we maybe need to have it come before us, and we can amend the plan with that at the subsequent one. Or are we ready to make a move today, or do you just need an indication from us?
We have the federal side and we have the state side.
Right. So I guess if you're asking, I'll frame it as a question back maybe to you, is I think just approving what you have currently so that we can address the federal regulations. I think the recommendation might be that at a future meeting we come together, having had the conversation about the STS monitoring report, sort of what your expectations might be about how we take that to the next level, and then depending on that, giving us some direction about what you might be looking for relative to the GHG emissions discussion. Because I think a lot of that really does have some questions around what is also within our authority, or your authority as a commission, or the director's authority as an agency, versus the bigger GHG conversation. So and the governor's office is also having a lot of conversations around clean jobs. We're going to see that as part of the legislation. So I might be looking to the director as to the timing of this.
Well, I think Commissioner O'Halloran has articulated a pathway here, but I think we have more conversations that play themselves out. Mr. Courtwright is right. We need to lean into this, and we've shown this department is willing to it at the national level. Now that is, they've taken a step back. It is what it is. The conversation in the state of Oregon will continue to grow. As a matter of fact, conversations between not only the sister agencies involved in the transportation sector, because this is not solely focused on the Oregon Department of Transportation. There are issues with our sister agencies at DEQ, at Land Conservation and Development, at the Department of Energy, and I would submit there are conversations that need to take place amongst your brothers and sisters on those commissions and boards that represent and oversee those agencies. To Jerry's point, the governor's office is bringing together just that type of conversation. I think it informs the information and the data that we would use as foundational to inform a decision and a direction from the commission. It will play itself out beginning now, and as we move into the 2019 legislative session, as Jerry said, there'll be conversations about cap and invest, carbon tax, that type of discussion. And I think those discussions will be informed by the work that the state agencies do specific to the transportation sector. So I think it is an issue that we need to bring back, but we need to bring back with a little more information and data and alignment with our sister agencies here. That's beginning. And I would submit to you, I think there needs to be alignment between commission boards as well. And I think that may be something, future conversations in store for us.
So Jerry, remind me of the time sensitivity on this action, because you're trying to comply with federal requirements. So I just want to understand whether
Right.
We have to take an action today to keep you on time.
Yes, you do. I don't know if Mr. Dessler is still here from Federal Highways or not, but we were given 2 years as part of MAP 21 and the FAST Act. They identified some additional planning regulations and that we need to be in compliance with. They gave us 2 years to do that. I think the clock ticks, I want to say like May 26th or something like that. It's someday in this month. And so as we do any future STIP amendments, we will have to show that our planning regulations are in compliance. So it is important that we take action on this. The other thing I would say is the director was speaking is that the bicycle and pedestrian plan has performance measures. The transportation options plan has performance measures. You might hear a little bit, I don't know exactly in the OPTP presentation around performance measures. So in some respects, the places that you as an agency or as a commission have some ability to help move the GHG line, you are measuring that with our active transportation performance measures. That maybe not part of KPMs, but we will be reporting on a regular basis with regards to those. So we are incrementally doing some measurement relative to that. I don't think it gets to Bob's point at all. I'm not trying to say that, but there are pieces of it.
So, and he also said that you were waiting for direction from us, or the agency was. Are you?
So, Commissioner, I think, yes, I think we gave the report that we had last month. I think that as staff, we did envision at some point coming back together and having a little bit of conversation relative to, so now what do we do with that? Where do we want to take that next?
So I think that Commissioner O'Halloran's idea is a good one to act on this, subject to potentially further amendment as it relates to a discussion which might lead to some direction for the department and therefore might cause us to further amend these plans consistent with where we go on this. And I also agree with the director's comment that this is certainly a multifaceted subject that involves a number of stakeholders and a number of agencies of government. So I like that approach that I think you're outlining.
Okay. Great. So I'd welcome a motion. As you stated, any changes to that?
Nope, I think.
Okay, very good.
Do we have a timeline on the re-report, or when we'll dive again?
So I will work with the director and with Travis to get that on the agenda, but we'll want to make sure that we tee it up for some outlined decision points. I think would be good to give us some guidance.
I guess the only thing I'd say is I'm going to miss the next meeting, as you know.
Right.
So I'd like to have it at a meeting that I attend. It's
Okay, very
an area I'm interested in.
I think it will take us a little while to sort of frame, depending on the conversation, or we could have a very sort of general conversation and then send us away to do work.
Okay, great. So with any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. And how about we come back at 1? All right.